Okay. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming today. Today is the first debate between our three gubernatorial candidates who are Democrats. And we thank them for coming out today, and we thank you for coming. We do have some town chairs and Democratic State Committee people in the audience that I'd like to recognize. Candy Glacier is here from Longmeadow. And she's the chair of the Longmeadow Democratic Town Committee and the Democratic State Committee. We also have Sharon Jewell, who is the chair of the Chicopee Democratic Town Committee. We have Jake Oliveri, who is the chair of Ludlow and also a co-sponsor as well as Sharon for this event. Dan Kelly is here, and he is a state committee member and vice chair of West Springfield Democratic Town Committee. We have Layla Denton, I may have that incorrect, I'll have to come back to it. Nancy Steinberg, who is on the Democratic State Committee, as well as Al, who is the Vice President of Chicopee Ward 3. We have Zeta Govan, who is Chair of the Springfield Ward 8. Thank you. And we also have Massachusetts Parents United, who is here, and that is Kim Rivera. She is a co-sponsor as well of this event. We just want to take a moment to have a moment of silence for two Democrats that we've lost over this last month. And Josephat Robles. And I know, Miguel Roman. Both of them were lost rather tragically. So keep them in the prayers. We'll just have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Well, we will have the national anthem sung by Caitlin Perman, and she is an East Longmeadow High School graduate. Please bring her up and give her a round, a nice warm welcome.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Great job.
Wow. Wow. I do want to say thank you, candidates, for coming to the other side of 495. I told you we existed. I think I missed one person that is running for office. Tracy Whitfield, and she's running for City Council at Large in Springfield. Thank you for coming today. Well, on to the business of business. Our moderator today is none other than Anthony Signoli. He is a veteran of many debates as an A-list for CNN, as an analyst for CNN and NSBC's presidential debate in New Hampshire. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Tony Signoli.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you all for being here on a Saturday where the sun is shining and it's still summertime. The fact that you're here says an awful lot, and the fact that these three candidates are here says a lot. They've got about 1 million miles more to go in this campaign before it's all said and done, running back and forth across the Commonwealth, and we deeply appreciate them all for being here in Western Massachusetts today. In addition to the audience here in the room, there's the audience that will be hearing this and seeing this through the media. We appreciate NEPR for being here today, and also other folks that are from the media and different media outlets from around Western Massachusetts. Our format today is really simple so that we can get right into it, as I know these candidates want to do. What we have in the beginning is opening statements from all three. We're then going to go right into candidate questions and answers. One candidate will ask a question of the other two. Those two will answer. The candidate who asked the question will have a moment, if they want, for rebuttal or commentary. And then after that, we're going to go to some questions that we received in advance from the committees, from folks online, and from the public. So it's a pretty easy format for the most part. Just a little bit before we began, everyone had a chance to pick a card from a deck of cards, and they were able to decide the order that they would go in here today. So in that regard, the first opening statement is from candidate Bob Massey. Bob.
First of all, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I've spent the last 3 weekends in Western Mass. I just want to tell you I'm still getting over the singing of that national anthem by Caitlin. Reminds me one day many years ago when our daughter, who was 7, stood up in our kitchen and showed what she had learned at school, and then she delivered a powerful version of the Star Spangled Banner, and I haven't had that feeling of tingling and reflection since then. So thank you, Caitlin. I'm running for governor because I'm worried that everything that flag stands for right now is at risk. The democracy is at risk. The American dream itself is at risk. We have an economy that is upside down and that is pulling money out of communities and sending it up to Wall Street and making it harder and harder for average families to survive. The things that we need are no longer affordable. And so there are multiple things that we can do to address structural problems over the next 10 years, but you need to have leadership and vision. Not just the leadership of one person, but the leadership from all of us as we set forth what is the path to a better future. Now, let me give you a couple of examples. Right now, we have the opportunity to lay down a broad, gleaming, modern transportation system that would reinvigorate economies across this state, especially in central and western Mass. We could start by speeding up trains and by making relatively small improvements, but we need to lay down that long-term plan. I'm shocked that so many parts of western Massachusetts still don't have internet, requiring kids to go to parking lots to do their homework, or small businesses that like to be set up here, that would like to live here, don't have that opportunity. So those are core structural long-term problems that need to be addressed, and I can't see what that says. Caution. All right, so I'll be cautious. The yellow flag. So let me tell you just very briefly. I have fire and determination about this, partly because of my own experience. Some of you know I grew up with serious medical problems. I wasn't able to walk as a boy. I got that ability to walk back because of a national health insurance program that unfortunately was not in the United States. It was in France. But I believe in single payer, I believe in national health insurance. I've fought for those things for 3 decades. Secondly, I come from a family, my mother was the first to go to college. I benefited from scholarships and from education. I just finished teaching at UMass Boston. I know how broken our higher education system is, how critical it is to our economy, and how much it needs to be fixed. Now, just a little bit in terms of my background in getting things done. You may not be familiar with some of the things I've done, but I have brought together groups that really strongly disagreed, groups like business, environmental groups, and investors. I've done that on an international basis, and I could do it here in Massachusetts with your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I want to thank the local Democratic committees for hosting this, and my two fellow candidates. This is the first time we've gotten to do something like this, so this is great. But not the last. I'm sure not the last. I'm Jay Gonzalez, running for governor because I think we need a governor who's actually trying to make progress on issues that affect people on a day-to-day basis. No one has taught me more about progress than my parents. My mom is from Cleveland, and during college, she went away on a foreign exchange program to Spain. 9 months later, she came back married to my 19-year-old Spanish father and pregnant with me. They didn't have a lot, and they had a lot of challenges that they faced. But with a lot of perseverance, they overcame those challenges and made a better life for themselves and for their family. And through that example that they set for us, they encouraged us to set high expectations for ourselves, and they instilled in us a belief that with hard work and a little help, reaching those expectations was actually possible. Now, those values aren't unique to me and my family, right? Those are our values, American values. And no one has reached higher, worked harder, and accomplished more together than the incredible people of Massachusetts. This is who we are. We have always been a leader, but not now, not under Governor Baker. I've been frustrated by how little our governor's accomplished, but I've been more frustrated by how little he has even tried. It is not good enough to simply accept the world the way it exists and try to manage it better. We need a governor, we need a governor who's going to see the way the world should be and take us to that place. Let's aim high. Let's be us. Let's give working families across this state a better deal, an economy that works for everybody, not just those at the top. How about a living wage, paid family leave, affordable higher education and housing and child care? How about we take on this dysfunctional healthcare system and implement a single-payer system that's simpler, cheaper, and does a better job keeping people healthy? How about we do a better job creating a transportation system, including out here in Western Massachusetts, that actually works for people? Let's aim high when it comes to other big challenges we face, like climate change, the biggest threat to our planet, and our broken criminal justice system, which is jailing way too many for way too long. And more important than any of that, let's aim high when it comes to how we treat people. So let's do it. Let's aim high. If we do, I know we can build a better future for everybody. That's the lesson my parents taught me. It's the American story. It's what the people of Massachusetts have proven over and over again, and it's what we should expect from our government and from ourselves. And that's why I'm running for governor. I'm in this because I care about people, and I want to make a difference in people's lives. I hope to earn your support.
And our next opening statement is from Seti Warren.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. I want to spend just a few minutes telling you why I made the decision to run for governor. I believe the issue of our time is economic inequality. And I got into this race because I believe the governor's office is where we can close the gap and ensure everyone in this state has a fair shot and an opportunity to live up to their full potential. I know this because I've been mayor for the last 8 years. The buck stops at my desk as the chief executive of my city of 88,000. When I ran for mayor, we inherited a $40 million structural deficit. We had no rainy day fund and 2 of the worst conditioned school buildings in the state of Massachusetts. In the 8 years since I've been mayor, we've eliminated that structural deficit. We've grown our rainy day fund to $20 million. We're building 5 new schools in the next 5 years, 3 of which are done, 1 of which is being constructed. We've got 2 AAA bond ratings. We have more teachers than we've ever had. We're building more fire stations than we ever have, and we're rebuilding our roads and sidewalks. We need to make sure we have a progressive governor that will execute and get it done. Every single one of my budgets in the 8 years that I've been mayor that I passed with my city council have been based on outcomes for people. It is a values document. We've got to make sure that we look at every single dollar and we address the issues of education and transportation in this area and putting in place a single-payer healthcare system. Finally, I enlisted in the Navy a little bit after 9/11 because my father was in the military, Korean War veteran, and my grandfather was a World War II vet, Battle of the Bulge. I got called up 10 years ago this fall to go to Iraq, And I spent that year, it was one of the toughest years I ever had. One of the things I took away from that year is that I live with people, I work with people that had nothing in common with me. People of different races, religions, ethnic backgrounds, and political persuasions. We had to work together to get through that year and get home. We've got to do the same thing here in Massachusetts if we're going to address economic inequality and make those generational investments that we know we need to make to give everyone a shot to live up to their full potential here in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
So now we get right into it. And our first question is going to be asked by Bob Massey. He will be asking the same question of both Jay Gonzalez and Seti Warren. And he has 1 minute to ask that question. Both candidates will get 2 minutes to answer. And if Bob so wishes, he has a moment for rebuttal. So Bob, your question, please, either two candidates.
Seti and Jay, you've spent a long time already running for governor, and a lot of that time has been spent raising money behind the scenes from wealthy donors and bundlers. Given that you now are going to owe a great deal to the privileged and the wealthy, why should anyone believe that you will really be willing to fight against their interests and for the working families of Massachusetts?
Who's first, Tony?
Jay, you're first.
Okay. So I've actually been fundraising in a grassroots approach. We've been doing house events that people have been hosting for me to raise money. I think we've raised money from the most donors of any candidate, and I'm really proud of the approach we're taking to fundraising. I'm really concerned, as you know, about Governor Baker and the approach he's been taking. I put forth on my website a whole set of proposals on campaign finance reform because I'm very concerned that our governor is taking an approach where he's violating the letter and the spirit of our campaign finance laws. He is asking big donors to provide huge checks beyond what was intended under Massachusetts campaign finance laws, and doing so in ways sometimes that aren't disclosed. There was a story in the Boston Globe just recently about the Office of Campaign and Political Finance issuing a fine against an organization, a shell organization in New York that was being used to funnel money for the charter school ballot campaign last year that Charlie Baker was a real part of. I have called for an investigation because I think there are a lot of issues this raises and concerns that are consistent with a pattern our governor has shown he is engaging in terms of going after asking his wealthy friends to write huge checks in ways that are inconsistent with what our laws allow. So I've asked that an investigation be done, including to determine what role Charlie Baker played in this illegal fundraising scheme. And I've also, as one of the many proposals I've made on campaign finance reform, asked that Governor Baker, I've said that I'm going to shut down this loophole that Governor Baker's been exploiting to collect checks in the amount of $43,000 that he's been funneling up to the Republican Party and back down to the state Republican Party, which is totally inconsistent with what our laws say. We need regular people to be able to dictate and influence elections, and that's what I'm for.
Look, one of the first things I did around my announcement was I called for all the candidates in this race not to accept corporate checks, dark money. Didn't hear back from the governor, not surprisingly. I think both of you guys answered that question publicly. But look, Bob, to answer your question, I'm going to run this campaign the same way I did when I knocked on 11,000 doors in Newton. I raised money through small contributions. I built a grassroots campaign. And I turned Newton around. I was able to do 70 town halls over the course of my first term that led to the opportunity for me to raise revenue through tax override because I got the support of my residents. Newton could afford to do that because we have a strong tax base, and I did it in my re-election year. And we reinvested that in teachers and schools and public safety. My 8 years as mayor, take a look at my record. I am committed to representing the voices of the people that I work for every single day, and I'm proud to have done that. I'm doing the same thing as governor. I'm across the state. I've been to over 100 cities and towns. over the last few months, building a grassroots campaign. Over 1,300 volunteers have signed up at the grassroots level. I'm committed to doing that. If I'm fortunate enough to become the governor here of the state of Massachusetts, I will represent every part of the state, including Western Mass. They will have a voice, I will listen, and we will execute so that we address the issue of our time, economic inequality.
Bob, you've got 1 minute if you have a comment or rebuttal to that.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I appreciate the qualities and intentions of both of my colleagues. I think there's a really core question about whether we are going to have deep change in Massachusetts around energy issues, around education, around affordable housing, around transportation. And to do that, you're going to need to have someone in that office who has experience, drive, determination, and who is not going to be cowed by powerful interests in this state or be seeking to please them. And so I ask you, do you believe that the system we currently have is corrupt and that we should be ending this campaign finance system because we're all trapped right now in a system that naturally forces us to pay attention to people with money when this, the race that I'm running is focused on the people who have experienced injustice, whether it's economic or racial or regional injustice, and that's going to require more of a fight than we're used to.
So the second question for both other candidates comes from Jay Gonzalez. Jay, your question, please, to both of the candidates.
Yeah, so, I appreciate the fact that Bob raised the issue of campaign finance. He's right. It is a problem. We spend so much time focused on raising money. It is a necessary part of running a campaign. The good news is Massachusetts laws actually aren't so bad. I mean, corporate contributions are not allowed in Massachusetts to statewide candidates. The maximum contribution is only $1,000 per person. So there isn't an opportunity under the laws that apply to us to really, for a wealthy donor to have undue influence on us. I'm concerned about what Charlie Baker's doing for the reasons I described, and I'm curious whether, I've put a whole set of campaign finance proposals out in terms of what I would do to reform our system. I've also called on for an investigation of what Charlie Baker's role was in this illegal financing scheme associated with the charter school ballot question. And I'm curious, Bob and Seti, whether you agree that there should be such an investigation.
Absolutely, I do agree. And in fact, I'd like to suggest right here that we find a way, the three of us, to get together and talk about how we're going to focus on Charlie Baker. Now, our campaign, the chair of the Democratic Party has said we're going to do that, but here we are already in the fall and we haven't. And I think that instead of spending the next year talking about each other, I think we should find a way in common to talk about the failures of Governor Baker, which are substantial. I also think that we should show what democratic unity looks like. In other words, show that our values are shared, show that our passion is shared, and one of us is going to be the nominee. And I've promised that if I'm elected, I'll hire both of you for my administration. But in all seriousness, I will campaign hard for either one of you. We need to show that unity now, not next September, and I'd like to do that by together agreeing on a whole set of things that we'll go after Governor Baker on.
Seti, you have 2 minutes.
Look, this is a very serious issue around these contributions that were made. And the larger, I think, question for us is the way this governor plays fast and loose with numbers, facts, and the law and rules. He does the same thing with the budgeting process, where none of us know at this moment how much it costs to maintain level service budget because he won't disclose that, what it costs to fund what we're doing now. I'm also very concerned about the question 2, the ballot question that was on the ballot. I fought hard against that question because of the cynical nature of it. We can't even fund public education now fully. The needs of children in Western Massachusetts are not being met now. So the notion that somehow adding 12 charter schools to siphon away public school dollars is wrong. So both of these both of these go back to whether Charlie Baker represents people, the people he works for, and is committed to ensuring every single person and child have a shot, an economic opportunity to make ends meet in our state and live up to their full potential. So I would hope that this is continued to be looked into by the folks across the board, looking at campaign finance law and rules that may have been broken. But we got a real systemic issue about how this governor operates.
Okay. Jay, you have 1 minute if you'd like to rebut or make another comment.
I mean, I think it sounds like we all agree that there are problems with the way our governor's been operating, particularly around campaign finance law. SETI is, I think, making the point that there are larger concerns with our governor, which we've all talked about and I think all agree with. But this is particularly concerning because it appears that there is an intentional effort to circumvent the letter intent of our campaign finance laws in soliciting huge donations, in this case from undisclosed donors, who have special access to the governor, special access that he's even promised to these big donors, to be a part of his governor's circle. This is taking power away from the people. And we need to make sure that our laws are enforced in a way that he's not able to do this, and that we are ensuring that regular people are having influence on our elections.
Thank you. Our next question is from SETI Warren to the other two candidates.
Thank you. So I want to bring it home here and focus a little bit on the region by asking the two of you this question. I've had the opportunity to work with a real superstar here and Senator Lesser. What are the issues and qualities you like the best about Senator Eric Lesser?
Well,
Bob, you're first, yes.
All right.
Same order.
Eric is an extraordinary man who has committed already an extraordinary part of his life to working for politics, working for the Obama campaign, and committing, now that he experienced public life in one form, to being a senator for this part of the state. And of course, his leadership on transportation is legendary and something that we desperately need. I mean, just to put it in larger context, we have been waiting all over the state for transportation problems to be solved. I'm from Somerville. We're still waiting for the Green Line extension. The people in the South Coast have been waiting 27 years. We've been talking about north-south rail link for 100 years, and especially in Western Mass, and talking about connecting the businesses and people out here with the rest of the state and with New York State. So Senator Lesser has been very clear about the need for this to develop higher speed rail and then ultimately very high speed rail. And I was shocked when the legislature turned that down, even a study of it turned down. And I'll tell you what I would have done as governor. I would have immediately turned around and raised the money from private sources, from foundations and philanthropies, to do that study anyway. Because there's no reason we shouldn't at least understand what the choices are to solve these core economic structural problems that are holding this part of the state down. So I am committed to that, and I have learned so much by being out here. What has been happening in Western Mass is fundamentally unfair. It's been happening for generations. It needs to be corrected, and I'm committed to that.
Jay Gonzalez.
Mayor, that was a great unexpected question, but I'm glad you asked it. Senator Lesser embodies what I hope we have in our public officials across the board. He is someone who cares deeply about the people he represents. He is a strong, competent advocate for issues not only for the benefit of the region, but for the state. He is unafraid of asking us to go beyond the status quo. And that is what my campaign is about, and what I see as the biggest problem with our governor. He is a status quo governor. He sees the job as where are we and what's the best we can do with what we have, as opposed to where do we need to go and how do we get there. And Senator Lesser is the latter. The east-west rail link is a great example of an issue that he has been like a dog with a bone on. The truth is the governor doesn't even need to raise private money. I have called on Governor Baker to take money from the capital budget, which he can do today, and fund the study. The study should be funded. He can do it now. If I were there, I would. And this is the example of a project that could be transformational for this region in terms of the economic development in this region, in terms of an affordable housing solution for the greater Boston area that desperately needs it. If we could make Springfield a commute to greater Boston, think of all the open jobs we could fill with people out here in Western Massachusetts. So I have a great deal of respect for Senator Lesser and appreciate his leadership and representation of people in his district.
Thank you. Seti, you have a minute if you'd like to make a comment or a rebuttal to any of that.
I think they said it all about the great senator from East Line.
I like this. We're ahead of time. The questions and the answers are brief and succinct, and that's appreciated. So we're going to go right into the next part of this debate, where we're going to be taking questions that we've already received from committee members, audience, over the internet. I will tell you that one of the hottest questions that we got, you've already answered, which was high-speed rail. So we may ask that question again, but I think you've well covered that, and that is to your credit, knowing what the folks in Western Mass are interested in. This next one, and we'll go in the same order, Bob Massey, Jay Gonzalez, and Seti Warren in answering. Each of you have 2 to 3 minutes to answer. And the question is this: how do you plan to raise the money necessary to compete and defeat Governor Charlie Baker, one of the state's most popular governors and the nation's most popular governors? And Bob, we go to you first.
Well, I am delighted to answer that question because it's easy. Charlie Baker apparently has a 75% approval rating. You know who else had a 75% approval rating? Now, you may have to search your memories for this name, Scott Brown. What happened to Scott Brown? He was beaten. George H.W. Bush, 92% approval rating when Bill Clinton decided to run against him, and Bill Clinton beat him. Now, the thing that we need to remember is that this race, whoever wins this primary, is going to join a coordinated campaign with Elizabeth Warren's re-election campaign. And last time she raised $45 million, and she had 46 field offices. So when Charlie Baker says, I'm going to raise $30 million, I'm going to be really, that's a negative Jedi mind trick. This is not the race you're looking for. We need to focus on this race because we are going to have millions of dollars. We're going to have higher turnout. That turnout is going to bring Democrats to the poll. We are going to be sick of having a governor who's been playing footsie with President Trump. We're going to be sick of the fact that over his first term he's gotten nothing done. We are going to rise up as a people and as Democrats to get the corner office back. And that is going to happen.
Bob, you still got about 30 seconds. Are you all set? Can I send it to Jay?
I yield my time to the gentleman.
These guys are all right. Jay, right in the next order to the same question, please.
I agree with Bob. The question, I think the specific question was, how are we going to raise enough money? Governor Baker, through all these ways in which he's violating the letter of intent of the campaign finance laws, as I described before, is planning to raise $30 million. We don't need to raise $30 million. We just need to raise enough to support a real, strong, robust grassroots campaign. And that's what we plan to do, and I am completely optimistic that we are going to be able to do that based on how things have been going so far. And, to Bob's point, we should not be worried about Governor Baker's poll ratings. It is easy to be popular when you don't do anything, and you never take a stand, and your whole approach to the job is about political caution versus political courage. This is an election. This is about choices, and when people are presented with a choice between a governor who will have no record of accomplishing anything meaningful in a way that will actually impact people's lives in a positive way versus a Democratic candidate who's all about making progress on issues that affect people and standing up for every single person in this state, we win. We will win this race. I am confident of that, and we will have the resources to do it with your help.
Thank you. Seti Warren?
When I first ran for public office back in 2008, 2009, a lot of smart political people told me, I shouldn't run, I can't win, no way, because I'd never run for office before. And I did a couple of things. First, I understood the power of grassroots politics. I not mentioned I knocked on 11,000 doors, won that election by 469 votes. Folks, this is going to be a person-to-person, dogged, face-to-face, grassroots effort to win. Number two, we have to do more than just say what we're against. We got to say what we're for. We got to be clear and honest and concise about the fact that we do need to put single-payer health care in the state now. We have to be clear and not be mealy-mouthed. We got to be clear about saying we got to give folks the skill set they need to be in this economy, make ends meet in this economy. That's why I believe in free public college, lifelong, with paid internships and apprenticeships. And we can't be afraid to raise revenue, folks. This governor is against the Fair Share Tax Amendment because he says no new taxes, we got a spending problem. We got to ask people making $20,000 a week to pay a little bit more. I'm going to keep that until we can reinvest that in education and transportation, right? So for me, and I believe that if we go out there and we have a nominee, and I'm asking your support, if I'm fortunate enough, I'm going to go right at this, and I'm going to challenge the notion that we can't put progressive values in the governor's office and execute. And I know we can because I've done it in Newton as a chief executive for the last 8 years.
Thank you. After high-speed rail, pot was the biggest set of questions we got. So we're going to go right to marijuana, guys, right to marijuana. Massachusetts voters said yes to the legalization of marijuana last November. The law's implementation has been delayed by 6 months, and the taxes on it have been doubled, with a marijuana commission appointed of members whose majority was publicly opposed to the ballot question. Why should we have faith that the law that they voted for in November will look anything at all like what they wanted it to look like? So that goes first to Bob Massey.
I don't mind mixing up who goes first. I mean, I enjoy the first shot.
Well, we did by the order of the card. We can go backwards if you want, sure.
Well, I'll take a shot at this one. Let's face it. We tried the war on drugs. We've tried incarcerating and jailing our way out of this problem. And the people of Massachusetts had the wisdom to recognize that we needed a fundamentally new approach, an approach that did not criminalize this behavior in the way that it had been before. And so, first of all, we have seen the legislature undo the will of the people multiple times. One of the best examples of this was that we had a robust, free election, public financing for elections that was voted by all of you and that was then throttled by the legislature. So that's one of the examples that I think is most concerning. But on this question, there's in addition to bringing this law into effect, we should do so in a manner that just doesn't bring big corporations to run and sell pot here. But if we're going to do that, it should be local people and worker-owned co-ops where the money that comes from this goes locally. And secondly, we have to deal with the problem of injustice of people who remain incarcerated for crimes that are no longer crimes. So we have to address that. And frankly, although I respect the individuals on this commission, I worry that the proportion that you described is not going to lead to the kind of fundamental reform that the people of Massachusetts clearly called for.
Okay. Jay Gonzalez?
Yes, so the voters spoke on this, and we need to implement it. It took a little longer than it should have, and there have been some changes that I'm not sure I would have agreed with that went maybe a little far from what the voters originally voted for. I think we got to be consistent with that intent in how we implement this law. I'm going to give this commission a chance. I think they've been at it a week. And I'm hopeful that they've got a big job in front of them. This is a big undertaking, introducing a brand new industry that's going to have lots of money, lots of interests, and we need to make sure we do it right. So they got to hit the deadline, but I'm hoping they're going to work hard and be thoughtful and get it right at the end of the day. This is a big deal, and my biggest concern with it is that we are true to the intent and we make legal recreational marijuana available throughout this state, hopefully in some of the ways that Bob described, where it's going to benefit people throughout this state from a business opportunity perspective. But we also do it in a way that's safe and that is going to ensure that it works for our state.
City Warren?
So I did vote against that question, but the people of Massachusetts spoke. What we need to do at this stage is make sure it's done the right way. It's executed so that it's fair, and there's transparency involved with it as well. So I would like to see the commission move along with this and make sure that it's implemented the right way.
Okay,
Tony, can we ask some follow-up questions just to mix it up a little bit?
We've got a lot of time, so sure, go
Well,
ahead.
I'm just curious, because Jay gave a little opening there. Do you both agree that we should structure these businesses in a manner that is based on local control, local benefit, local ownership, and local employment?
I think to the extent that that can be the outcome, and we can create the structure to incentivize and prefer that and give preference to that those outcomes, yes, we should. To the extent that people in a community want to have it a retail shop or a cultivation facility, and there aren't local businesses who want to do it, they shouldn't be denied the opportunity. But I think, yes, we should be trying to make the benefit, the bang for the buck here, the benefit for the people of Massachusetts as big as possible. Try to squeeze as much positive out of it as we possibly can.
Seti?
Look, there's a lot of towns here in Western Massachusetts that are really looking to create jobs and enterprise. So to the extent that we can provide a vehicle using this new law that's in place to do that, we should, to create those outcomes. And I would, beyond that, and I know we're on the marijuana question, but we also need to focus beyond marijuana on attempting to grow small businesses that exist here in Massachusetts, providing the capital and resource so that they can. There are many sole proprietors here in Western Massachusetts that are looking to grow. There's an industry here that's looking for infrastructure in the form of transportation, good regional transit authorities. Pioneer Valley needs to be invested in. There have been continual cuts here made. I know if we do east-west rail that extends with some transportation nodes further out from Springfield into Western Mass, north-south rail, we can grow the economy as well investment in broadband so that we can expand the existing businesses and ideas that are here. We'll really see a difference here in Western Massachusetts.
Thank you. Our next question. As governor of Massachusetts, you have to represent the entire state. But if you could, what would you do to bring Amazon.com to the 413? And I think there was a thought here of maybe changing the order, so if you don't mind, we'll start with Seti on this one. We'll reverse it for a bit. So, Seti?
I love that question. No, I do. Look, there's some great things about the state right now. A lot of this economic boom is happening in Greater Boston, right in the Seaport District. And instead of incentivizing, putting together deals like the GE thing that went through, we should be looking to have an Amazon out here. And by the way, let's ask them to help partner and invest in expanding transportation, right? Let's ask them, because that helps them and it helps create jobs here and grow economic vitality. So I'd be looking to expand this economic boom so it's not just concentrated in Greater Boston. Putting together a real transportation plan and having Amazon help us grow jobs at the same time and address economic inequality, which is what the defining issue of our time is. There's an opportunity.
Thank you. Jay Gonzalez?
So, the Greater Boston area is a unique area. It's the so-called hub where we've got a lot of economic activity and uniquely positioned in many ways as a world leader. I think what we need to do is look at what the strengths and challenges are in every single one of our areas of the Commonwealth and figure out what our plan is, one economic development plan for every region of this state that is the right plan for that region. And figure out what are those strengths that we can leverage and build on, what are those challenges that we need to address. Transportation infrastructure obviously being one of the keys. Education, workforce training, particularly out here in Western Massachusetts, is a big deal. But what is that grand plan for the region that government, state and local, that local businesses, that local workers can agree on and all row in the same direction to get to? We have little pots of money all across state government, in silos, in different agencies, all working at cross purposes a lot of the time. What I want to do is develop an economic development proposal and plan for Western Massachusetts and for each of the different regions of the state, and make sure we are coordinating our resources and efforts to execute against it, so that even if it isn't, if the plan for Western Massachusetts isn't we're going all in and all we want to do is have an Amazon here, but if we want to build on the creative economy out here, or we want to build on precision manufacturing in Western Massachusetts, or whatever it is that is right for this area, informed by the people of this region. That's what we should be working together on, and what I would commit to you as your governor is working in partnership toward an economic development plan that works for the western part of this state and for the people in the western part of this state.
Bob?
So you're going to get a different kind of answer from me, because I am a social justice activist who has worked hard for economic development, and I went to Harvard Business School, so I understand business. And I want to tell you, I have some real questions about the role of an Amazon or the role of a General Electric or other major companies that come in and extract tax benefits for we're not sure what the benefits to the community ultimately might be. The Seaport District that SETI mentioned is a classic example of the massive stupidity of what happens in the eastern part of the state, because they've put $2 billion of new investment into the most likely to flood area in the entire eastern seaboard. So think about that. So by not paying attention to long-term questions like climate change, they've put $2 billion at risk, and they're going to come running to the legislature and demand relief for their own mistake and leave Western Mass hanging. Now also, Amazon. I use Amazon, I like Amazon, but the bigger it gets, the more I think it is a danger to small business in America. It has already destroyed so many parts. So let me tell you something. I am not opposed to the idea of Amazon coming under any circumstances, but I would extract the maximum value from Amazon in return so that the smaller businesses and the communities that have been betrayed are not going to continue to be betrayed by the elitist corporate behavior and decision-making in the eastern part of the state.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question is a little more personal, perhaps a little bit more inflective. It is to ask you each if you could give us the name of one political hero and one personal hero. And we'll start again with Seti Warren.
Political hero, President Kennedy. I believe right now we are at a moment in our country's history. We have divisions of class, race, religion, gender, sexual orientation. The one thing that President Kennedy did in 1960 was he asked a generation of people to step up, particularly those who have more, and give more, so that the country could be stronger and better. When I think about President Kennedy, I think about the question I'm asking everyone in this campaign, and that is, what kind of Commonwealth do we want to be? What kind of Commonwealth do we want to be? Is it okay that people are making decisions between co-pays, going to the doctor, and paying for mortgage, prescription drugs paying for, or food? We have got to step up and ask those, the strengths of Massachusetts, those who are doing well in Massachusetts, to give more, step up and give more so we can reinvest it and ensure that everyone has a fair shot in this state. My personal heroes are my parents. My parents grew up in tough neighborhoods in Harlem and the Bronx. Dad grew up in a neighborhood that was deemed the worst block in America. He got out of life by joining the military. My parents went to school down south, North Carolina, A&T, threw themselves in the civil rights movement. It took them 6 years to finish college. And my dad purchased the home where I live today, where I grew up with my two sisters, and where I live today with my wife and 2 children with GI Bill benefits. GI Bill benefits. This is an investment for people of modest means to make ends meet and ensure their kids can do better than they did. The values in my house that I grew up with was to ensure that I live out what my father thought and his vision and my parents did, putting themselves on the line to ensure current people in our society, in our state, and our kids and our grandkids, we leave a better future for them and we make those investments.
Thank you. Jay Gonzalez.
So I have many of both types of heroes. I got to work for John Glenn. Everybody knows John Glenn, literally an American hero who reached for the stars and got there. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick my former boss, Governor Patrick. I knew him best. I saw him up close and personal as he was governor of the Commonwealth and worked hand in hand with him. And he was in it for the right reasons. He cared deeply about the people across this state, across the entire state, and he wanted to make a difference for them. And I think people saw that in the governor. Even if, regardless of whether you agreed on every position or not, I think people believed Governor Patrick was there because he cared about people and wanted to make a difference in their lives. Every single person in this state. And I have a great deal of respect for him, for that approach and for governing from the heart. In terms of personal, I have many also. One, my dad, an immigrant who came to this country, didn't speak English, never been to college, worked his way from laying bricks in a city sewer system to becoming a successful small businessman and a proud American citizen. One of these people who just through will and optimism and hard work believed in himself and propelled himself forward. It was very instructive for me. Also my wife, Cindy, who some of you know, she's from Chicopee, Massachusetts. She was born to, yes, for Chicopee. She was born to a very young mother. They didn't have anything. And she worked hard through school, not someone who was handed anything in life, worked her way through college, ended up being successful in her career in government communications and now with her own public relations firm. And she's someone who is not daunted by anything and who loves the adventures of life and pushes us to continue to have new adventures. And she pushes me. And I appreciate that about her and love her for that.
Thank you. Bob?
I value the Kennedy tradition. I value people who have a dream based on our core values and who pursue that dream even though it doesn't look likely that it's ever going to be realized. And so my political hero is one of America's great political heroes, which is the daughter of Massachusetts, Susan B. Anthony. She was born in 1820 in Adams. She worked her entire life for women's suffrage. She took time around the time of the Civil War to work against slavery and for African American male suffrage. And after the war, she thought all the people who had worked for that would join her in working for women's suffrage, and they did not. So she had to work for 40 more years, knowing that this was likely not to happen in her lifetime. And she crisscrossed this country in her partnership with Elizabeth Cady Stanton, which is one of the great partnerships of American life. And she died in 1905, having never seen her dream realized. But 15 years later, women got the vote in the United States as she had dreamed for, 100 years after her birth. That is a great American hero. I want to add that We need to be thinking like that, not like Governor Baker can barely make it 3 months out in his imagination. Then my personal hero is a very quiet man who was, in a sense, forced into global leadership, and that's my very dear friend, Bill McKibben. Bill McKibben is a quiet writer. He would rather be by himself at a desk working on another article for The New Yorker. But he realized that our entire planet is in a dire strait because of climate change. And he realized that he could not remain quiet in the face of the endless failure and hypocrisy over the last 25 years that has blocked us from moving forward on this critical question. So he spoke up, and he identified the failures that so many institutions have, talking about one thing, but getting money through their investments in climate change and fossil fuel companies. And he has gone around the world and stirred hundreds of thousands of people to address this question. And so he's a man who met the call of history, even though it did not meet his personality. I admire him, and I think we also should model our lives on him.
Thank you. Great answers all, gentlemen. This next question. Do you believe that Governor Baker has upheld his promises during his campaign and as governor to take a look at the issues and problems that were plaguing the division of children and families in Massachusetts? Has Governor Baker and his administration effectively made a difference at DCF? And we'll start again with City Warren.
I recently had a meeting upon a social media request with the Office of Public Defenders recently in the last month or so in New Bedford. A group of them, these are lawyers who defend children who are in foster care. But the underlying initiatives they take are not just legal. They are doing casework, social work. They are, in many cases, the last lifeline for children, the most vulnerable children in our state. And here's what I heard, and here's what is happening. First of all, the Office of Public Defenders is continually underfunded. We have a scenario where the folks that are supposed to be ensuring that children and families of children have the protections they need, the resources they need, may not be there for them in our state. And Governor Baker continually plays games with our budget this way. The second thing I heard continually from the folks that work closely with our children, our most vulnerable children, is that we have a scattershot approach to what kind of services they actually receive. Very disjointed, very disconnected. So at this point, the answer is absolutely not. He is not. And in fact, we're falling further behind. This is where, from my perspective, we've got to ensure our budgets are based on outcomes for people. We've got to make sure these dollars are spent in a way, and this is how I did my 8 years in Newton. Every single dollar we need to invest in, we need to make sure there's the right outcome, and if we need to raise revenue, if we need to increase spending to improve the chance for a child to be able to live successfully here in the state, we got to do it, and we got to be open and transparent about it.
Jay Gonzalez.
So, Tony, the answer is no, an unequivocal no. He has not followed through on his promise. You know, one of the most fundamental responsibilities we have through government, our collective instrument, and I think one of the ways in which we should be measured by how we are doing collectively is on how we treat the most vulnerable among us, including abused and neglected children, probably at the top of the list. The Department of Children and Families is supposed to take care of these kids throughout our state. And honestly, many of us, we often take for granted that that's happening. It is not always happening the way it should, and it is not happening the way it should today. There's a report that came out. The Child Advocate issued this report not long ago. I read a news report on this that said that more kids are dying under the care and custody of the Department of Children and Families under Charlie Baker than did under Deval Patrick. This was supposed to be one of the things our governor said he was going to fix, right? Now, this is not easy. These are hard issues. We've got to be thoughtful about how we approach them, but we need to do everything we can to protect kids. He said he was going to fix this. and it's worse. And that's one example among many of areas that are worse. The budget, where he just got downgraded by one of the rating agencies for the first time in 30 years. The opioid crisis is worse. Our transportation system is worse. The three of us go around the state hearing all the complaints about it from people. And this is one area that's worse. At one event earlier this week, I met with a foster parent who is involved in the system and working with the Department of Children and Families. And he is very frustrated. He said there are huge backlogs of cases that aren't being addressed, that his caseworker for his child doesn't have the time to do what she should be doing to take care of and help support this child. So this is coming not just from the stats and the facts, but from the people who are directly impacted by the system. And as your governor, I would do everything I possibly could to ensure we're treating the most vulnerable among us the way they deserve to be treated.
Thank you. Bob Massey.
I strongly agree with what my two colleagues have said, and I just want to set this in a slightly larger context. One of the things I think I bring to this role is that I believe in the interconnectedness of these problems, the system that's connected, and in the broader concept of sustainability. Now, let me give you an example. We've already talked about it. If you had better transportation, you'd have better housing. If you had more affordable housing, you would have child and maternal health improving. If you had improved child and maternal health, kids would do better in school. If they do better in school, they are eligible then for jobs. If they have jobs, they can build a life for themselves. These things all go together. They're not a checklist. They are a unified understanding. And in this particular case, the violence done against children is obviously horrible. It is the tail end of a chain reaction that from many other ways in which we undercut families, and particularly women. We do not provide equal pay for equal work. We do not provide adequate daycare. We do not provide... This refusal to support the fundamental role of being a parent, and particularly a mother, leads to distortions in the system and broken down and depression and anxiety and stress and ultimately violence. But if you want to stop the violence, in addition to the actions you need to take at that tail end, you need to be deeply committed to making sure that the early parts are also solved so that you don't have this machine that generates violence among children that is working today and that can only be addressed by a systematic approach to justice.
Thank you. We are doing very well on time. There are 98 more questions you'd like to have answered, but we don't have that much time. So I am going to ask just one last question before we go to closing statements. And this one, Massachusetts taxpayers, including the people of Western Massachusetts, will contribute $130 million to the latest improvements to Boston Harbor. Here we have the Connecticut River. One of Ted Kennedy's dreams was to find a way to utilize that river for the benefit of the people of Western Massachusetts, both economically and in tourism. In a short answer, any thoughts or ideas on our Connecticut River here in Western Mass, and how, as governor, you might find a way to utilize that for all of us? City Warren?
Great question. Look, there are so many strengths, including the river, here in Western Massachusetts that we can build upon. I am committed to ensuring that we make investments so that we can grow our strengths here in Western Massachusetts. So I will be committed to looking at the river as an asset, and I look forward to coming back here to seeing how we can build on that here in Western Mass.
Thank you. Jay Gonzalez?
Yeah, so the river is a huge asset for this region, right? It is a huge asset. It has supported businesses and the quality of life out here. As I said before, what I want to do as governor is come to the people of Western Massachusetts and to this region to better understand how you see better utilizing the river and what ways the state can support this region in doing it successfully. And that is one example among many, but we need a common plan that we are all working towards together that's going to benefit the growth and sustainability of this region. The river is one example of an asset that should be a part of that discussion. And I'm committed to being a partner to this region in doing that.
Bob Massey?
So I've had the chance to go back and forth across the Connecticut River many, many times over this summer, and I can never get over how beautiful it is, or frankly, how beautiful the whole region is. But I'll tell you something. If you wanted me to come out here to learn about the injustice this part of the state has faced, you have succeeded. I have been out here, and I understand the over and over again ways in which decisions have been made that shortchange here and benefit the eastern part of the state. Even though I'm from Somerville, I see that. And I see that in so many ways. We give huge tax benefits to GE to put its headquarters in the most likely to flood place in the state. We give a huge tax benefit while the people of Pittsfield are still wondering what's going to happen to the Housatonic River, which has not yet been cleaned up. The river will be one of the great attractions to the region, but before we get that, we have to have a way to get people around and information around in terms of Wi-Fi. I mean, I have to tell you, I came out here and I said, what's the biggest problem, one of my earliest visits? And everybody in the room said, internet. And I said, is that still a problem? Because I hadn't been here for a couple years. And everyone went, yes! And I don't know how the legislature can justify this failure over now well over a decade, because it's essential to the modern economy. So without taking those steps, I mean, the river is wonderful, but the river is one piece of building this into the kind of community that has all of the resources that allow modern 21st century people to flourish and benefit. So it's part of a package of injustices, regional injustices and inequity that must be corrected.
Thank you. Well, we've covered a lot of ground, and now already we close this part of the debate, and we go to closing arguments or closing statements. And since Bob Massey went first, I think we'll start again in reversed order, and we'll go to Seti Warren with his closing.
Thank you very much. This has been a great debate so far. I look forward to the continued conversation. I know you're here because you want to elect a progressive governor. The only way we're going to do that is through dogged grassroots outreach, a strong grassroots campaign. I've been doing a little, as I learned about East Longmeadow, I've been doing a little research about where we are in this area. One of the things about this town that's so interesting that I found is that Donald Trump got more votes than Charlie Baker did. That tells you, and you ought to look at the numbers here, that tells you if we get high turnout, we win. I'm going to have that kind of campaign on the ground with you here. So I'm asking for your support. I'm really fortunate to have a couple of people here that know how to do this. John Walsh is working with me, Nancy Stolberg, who many of you know, working with me. We're going to work really hard, and I'm going to work my heart out. I'm going to work my heart out with you to drive build a grassroots campaign and build turnout. But here's the deal. If you decide that you're going to support one of these other two gentlemen, which, by the way, great candidates, right, that we have here, all of us, I would encourage you to sign up now. If you're not going to support me, support one of them. Because at the end of the day, we've got to beat Charlie Baker. And we're all going to be together next year to do that. So I ask for your support in this race. I want to earn it. I'm going to work hard. We need to tell the truth and be concise and not be afraid to do it. And if we do that and we address the centralized issue of our time, economic inequality, and we're honest about those solutions, we build a grassroots campaign, we not only win the governor's office, but we change the way we govern so we can leave a world better off for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Jay Gonzalez.
Thank you, Tony. And thanks to all of you for being here. It matters to show up to stuff like this. We've got a lot to be concerned about in this country. One of the lessons I've taken from this last presidential election, and this is something President Obama talked about in his farewell address, if you remember that. But it's this notion that our liberties and our democracy and the strength of our community, these fundamental American privileges, are not self-fulfilling. They need us. They need us to breathe life into them and to protect them and be vigilant about them, and we cannot take them for granted. So showing up matters. The good news is, as we've been going around the state, I think I can speak for all of us up here, we've been seeing a lot of new energy. A lot of people showing up to stuff like this who've never showed up before. And they are energized and they want to get engaged, and that is good for all the reasons that Mayor Warren just talked about. A lot of that energy right now is focused on Washington. We need to focus there. We also need to be honest about the fact that the best we're going to do in Washington right now is hold the line. The only place we're going to move forward is here in Massachusetts. And moving forward, making progress, that is a fundamental part of who we are too. What I'm offering as a candidate, I think we all want to make progress, and there's probably more similarities than differences. I have leadership experience in state government getting big things done. As Governor Patrick's right-hand man as Secretary of Administration and Finance, I often was his point person negotiating the big things we got through during those first 6 years with the legislature and other key stakeholders. So I know how to do it, I've done it before, and I can deliver on the ambitious agenda that we need. I also think we're going to have to hold Governor Baker accountable for his claim that he's a great manager. He's been failing as a manager. And I've been there. I'm going to be able to put my record up managing in state government against his, and my record of leadership in the private sector as CEO of a health insurance company that covered low-income people in the Medicaid program, and go toe-to-toe with him, which we're going to need to do. So I'm asking for your support. I hope to see you out there on the campaign trail and really appreciate your engagement. It matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Massey.
This has been a very powerful experience for me already. I have been in more than 100 communities. I've talked to people, more than 7,000 people in small groups. I've filled notebooks with your stories. I've been moved by those stories and changed by them. By a young man I met who is now, because he wanted to be a civil engineer and went to a UMass school, he's now $180,000 in debt. He's in an invisible prison that will be hard to get out of the rest of his life. I've learned from people who are struggling. I met a woman who's about to retire, and she has no idea how she's going to have the resources to care for her mother, who's still alive and who depends on her. I've learned from people who have become friends or people that I've gotten to know, learned about their lives. I hope she doesn't mind, but I've learned from Alicia and from her son Alex, who are here today. I've learned from so many people. And what this has done is intensified my desire to make deep change. The kind of change that Franklin Roosevelt talked about in 1944, when in the middle of World War II, he talked about how far we would come with our political Bill of Rights and how we now needed to have an economic Bill of Rights, which made sure that every citizen had a good home, a good school, a good doctor, and a good job, because he said, without those things, we are not free. Now, Charlie Baker has had a tremendous opportunity to lead, but he has not led, and he has not objected to Donald Trump, who is destroying our country. Now, let me remind you, he did not go to the Women's March. He did not go out to the airport. He did not go to the Science March. He did not go to the Climate March. And when asked whether we had committed fraud by going to New Hampshire to vote, which is why Donald Trump says he didn't win that election, Charlie Baker, who should have stood up for us, said, I don't know what goes on in New Hampshire. That's what he said. So you've heard some bold goals. Now, I have led organizations, brought people together, helped people get over their divisions, and built ideas and institutions that have changed the national and the international economy. And I do that because I want to follow in the tradition of the Kennedys. Jack Kennedy did not say to us, tell me what you want, I'll make sure I get that for you. He said, as Americans, we are called to do great things. As citizens, we are called to great things. We go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And Bobby Kennedy said, I see things that were not, and ask why not. And Teddy, who I had the chance to campaign with, used to say, we are Americans, this is what we do. We reach for the heights, we go to the stars. I've seen it, I've lived it, and we can do it again. And if you believe that's the kind of aspiration that you want in the heart and in the actions of your governor, I hope that you will support me. I hope that you will support all of us, because the path to the future of this Commonwealth lies through a Democrat in the corner office. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all three. That was incredible. We appreciate your time. We're now going to do something a little different that I haven't seen really done that often in this neck of the woods or even in Massachusetts. We're going to kind of open this up some more, but not to questions and answers back and forth, but the three candidates now have an opportunity to come and visit with you for certain blocks of time. Angela Thorpe will give us an idea as to where each candidate should go in a moment, but there'll be an opportunity for you to ask them questions directly, perhaps to go a little further on what you've heard here today. Let me say this in closing. Here we are in the land of Dr. Seuss, and we all know the Lorax, that great land from the Lorax. I love what I heard from each one of these candidates today, because one thing that they agreed on top of other things, was that unless people like you get involved, do things, nothing's going to get any better. And that was the great line of the Lorax, unless people like you. And that's what this all comes down to. So thank you for being here on a Saturday afternoon, at the end of summer, and a long way away from this race. And thank you all with your millions of miles still to go in this campaign. Seti Warren, Jay Gonzalez, Bob Massey. Thank you all very much.
Every part of the state. I only have